Hi again. In History of Christianity by Kenneth Latourette, a course in Western Europe. This is page 333, dealing with the influence of Benedict. Much more widely influential than Cassiodurus and than even the Irish monks was Benedict of Nursia. A contemporary of Cassiodurus, he was also an Italian. He was born about the year 480 at Nursia, among the Apennines northeast of Rome, and was of good family. As a youth he went to Rome to study, but the scholastic life held no attractions for him. He was distressed and disgusted by the vices and frivolities of the city, and when about 15 or 20 years of age he took up the life of the hermit. Fame began to come, and the monks of a neighboring monastery urged him to become their abbot. He proved too strict for them and returned to his hermit's routine. High and low sought him, eager to share with him what was deemed the complete Christian life, or brought their sons to have him train them in it. There, at Subiaco, up a valley east of Rome, 12 monasteries arose, each with 12 monks and a superior. About 528 or 529, when he was not far from 50 years of age, Benedict moved to Monte Cassino, not quite halfway between Naples and Rome, and there, on its summit, destroying a pagan temple where worship to Apollo was still maintained, he established a monastery. The monastery grew, and although he remained a layman, bishops and priests as well as the laity came to consult him. He seemed to carry with him an atmosphere of quiet peace. He died sometime after 542, preceded shortly by the twin sister who had also adopted the monastic life and lived in a convent not far from his own. Benedict's great contribution was the rule which he gave to his monastery. In devising it, he learned what he could from predecessors, especially Basil of Caesarea, but also John Cassian, founder of a famous monastery near Marseille, and other monks. However, he was not a slavish borrower, for his rule bears indelibly the mark of his own experience as monk and abbot. He was aware of the various kinds of monks, some anchorites, some wanderers, some living by twos and threes, but without wise guidance. He believed the best form of the life of a monk to be the cenobitic, that of the community, and it was for this that he devised his rule. In it he displayed that genius for order and administration which we associate with those who created and governed the Roman Empire. That it was Benedict who had never had the experience of civil administration, rather than the seasoned Roman statesman Cassiodurus, who devised a rule which embodied the qualities which we regard as characteristic of Rome, is surprising and seems to belie that comment. Yet Benedict, with his background of Roman culture, and probably without at all being aware of the significance of what he was doing, worked out a monastic organization which stood the test of the centuries. As Benedict envisaged it, the monastery was to be self-contained and self-supporting, with its fields and workshops. Over it was the abbot, chosen by the entire community. He was to have complete authority, but was to remember that his title meant father, and that he was ultimately accountable to God. The monastery was to have other officers, especially if it were large, among them a prior or provost, deans, each over 10 monks, a cellarer, that's Cellarer, a novice master, and a porter. Monks were to be admitted first for a novitiate of 1 year. After that time, their decision was irrevocable. Upon entry, the monk was to surrender all his property, either distributing it to the poor or giving it to the monastery. He was to think of nothing as being his own. The nobles and wealthy who brought their sons to be entered in the monasteries, even though they made large gifts to the foundation, were to expect no special favors. The ideal was a kind of Christian communism, like that of the early Christians in Jerusalem, whom Benedict cited for his precedent, where no one called anything his own, but all shared in the common work, or the common stock. The life was orderly, but was not unduly severe, and was probably more comfortable than was that of the great masses of the population. Clothing and meals were simple but adequate, and special provision was made for the ill, the aged, the very young, and those doing heavy manual labor. There was to be fasting at regular times, but this was not of the kind practiced by the extreme ascetics whom we have met. Much weight was given to humility. Provision was made for various degrees of discipline, from private admonition to physical punishment, excommunication, and as a last resort, expulsion. Idleness was declared an enemy of the soul. The entire round of the 24 hours was provided for, with 8 services, one every 3 hours, and with periods for sleep, including a rest early in the afternoon, for eating, and for labor. The labor might be in the fields or in the library, according to the aptitude of the monk. There was also time for directed and supervised reading and for meditation and private prayer. Silence was encouraged and was the rule at meals and after compline, the last of the services of the day. Joking and laughter were frowned upon. There was reading aloud at meals from religious books by those assigned for that function or to that function. Stress was placed on worship by the entire community, and directions were given for the services. These were to include the Psalms, so that the whole of the Psalter was recited each week, reading from the Old and New Testaments, with accepted commentaries on them, hymns, prayers, among them the Lord's Prayer, and the frequent use of the Gloria, the Kyrie eleison, and the Canticle Benedictus. Although hospitality was enjoined and practiced, provision was made for keeping the monks from having more contact with the outside world than was absolutely necessary. There was a place for priests, for they were needed to say Mass, but they were to obey the rule as fully as the lay monks. The rule was wisely designed for a group of men of various ages living together in worship and in work for the cultivation of the full Christian life as that was conceived by the monk. More about Benedict next time. I'll put in a link to a video we did on Acts chapter 2, the 7 characteristics of the early church, the church of after Pentecost. See you next time.